Jake, in Chapter 2 of your book, Scientology A to Xenu, you spoke about the security checks you knew were coming when you felt the church was turning on you, and stated because of the RPF you knew how to approach these checks, but you stopped short of saying how. I have to know, was the preparation for security checks a mental preparation, or was it a physical act you could perform to make that needle do what you needed it to do? I find this interesting because if it was a mental trick, where did you go mentally? Or if it was a physical act, what could you do or did you do to beat the machine? All right, so you're referring to that time when I was getting when I was leaving the Sea Org and I was getting a security check in order to be okayed to go. And that beating an e-meter is you can do it mentally or you can do it physically. I've seen both, or you can do both. And I would not do it physically. I didn't do anything like that. But what I did see people do in order to do that was they would sometimes have ways of either messing with their hands or more usually with their feet. They would rub their feet on the ground, right? And usually when you're on a meter, you have your shoes off. Sometimes you have your shoes and socks off because tight, restrictive shoes and socks or stockings can drive the tone arm on the meter, that's a dial, one of the dials on the meter, way up, and it makes the needle dance around too much and it's too active. So if you take your shoes and socks off, it sort of relieves some of that pressure and the needle calms down a bit. So I saw people who would do this with their feet. And by doing that very gently and slowly, the meter needle would start doing this. And this is called a floating needle. And it indicates that you've reached the end of a process or the end of a security check question. So, you know, you could do it that way. And of course, I know about that because people got busted doing that. It wasn't because they were bragging about how successful they were at beating the e-meter. That's a big no-no in Scientology. Another way you can do it, though, and this is something that I knew about from early on in Scientology, is to just cast your mind off to thinking about pleasant things. In a security check, you're being interrogated. You're being asked very sharp and pointed questions in an interrogatory style about things you've done that you are. If you have done them and are guilty of them, you're going to be nervous about. You're going to be anxious about it, right? That's the idea. And by answering the questions, you relieve the nervousness and anxiety because you get the guilt off by saying, confessing what you did. But if you're not interested in doing that, or if you just feel like the whole thing's a big waste of time, then you're not really in there pitching. And auditing requires that you be in there part of the process and that you be in there pitching and participating in the activity. So I found that when I was on the RPF for 3 years, getting a lot of sec checking, that there were plenty of times where I just didn't feel like participating, but I had to be there and I had to get through this thing in order to finish the program. But I knew I didn't have anything to answer to some of these questions. And so I just wanted to get through it. And so I started casting my mind away to other places. And maybe intensively focusing on those things, like pleasurable experiences that I had had, or things that made me feel good. And sometimes that would work, and sometimes it wouldn't. Most of the time it did. All in the direction, for me, of trying to get that needle to float. Okay, trying to get the needle to do this kind of emotion. And so if I thought about movies I really liked, or, when I was, married on the RPF, I would think about my wife, or, think about things that I would consider pleasurable experiences, or fond memories that I had, then I could get that needle to start floating. And that would be the end of that question, and we could move on to another one. And I would be really intent on it too. I would sit there and I'd just be looking at the auditor and I'd be, bring it on, man, bring on that question, right? And I'd just have a big smile on my face and let's go, right? And like I said, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But it worked often enough that it convinced me that the meter was not this see-all, sort of perfect machine that could always read my mind and read my thoughts. And I started realizing that maybe this wasn't everything it was cracked up to be. So that's how I did it. And that's how I've heard other people have done it too. And I hope that answers your question.